Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the BowhuntingAZ podcast. I hope everyone's had an awesome hunting season. Hopefully everyone's got their elk and antelope applications in on time and your cards are up to date. Today is March 1st and cards are already getting hit. Good luck to everyone in the draw. As some of you have seen if you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, I've partnered with a couple companies who bring products or services to the table that offer all of us a better quality of life in one aspect or another. From gear to supplements, optics and coffee, they're all brands that I personally use each and every day. So I just want to thank each of these brands for their support and share what they have to offer with each one of you guys. I don't know about you guys, but I'm a huge coffee nut. I like my coffee strong and a solid flavor to back it up. The guys over at Backwoods Grind have it going on. I get my coffee shipped every 2 weeks to me automatically, and you can choose whole bean or different variations of ground. You can opt for a one-time purchase, bi-weekly, or a monthly basis. Backwoods Grind coffee is a coffee that goes beyond the mug. From traditions to memories and long-lasting relationships, these are all built upon the passion brought to you by their blends specifically roasted for hunters and outdoorsmen alike. Visit backwoodsgrind.com and use code BAZ10 to get 10% off your order. I'd also like to thank Rax is hands down the coolest bow hangers on the market. Display your bow with pride in your house, your garage, or anywhere you'd like. They carry most major bow brands while also offering a custom service if you have an idea or logo of your own that you'd like to make into a bow hanger. Use them to display your traditional bow, compound bow, or crossbow. They also work great for hanging your hunting gear, bags, or hats. Not to mention the designs look just plain awesome all by themselves. A Rax hanger makes for a great gift for that special hunter in your life. Go to raxinc.com, that's RAXXINC.com, to see some of the available designs or contact Rax to discuss a custom hanger of your own. If you'd like to see how sick their custom hangers are, go check out my Instagram feed, guys. For listeners of the BowhuntingAZ podcast, use the promo code PODCAST and get 15% off your order. Rax, show off your passion. Alright, so a bit of a season recap for me. I did some OTC hunting in August, and sum up for that, way too hot. I almost got stranded on top of a mountain during a raging monsoon. I had lightning hitting 50 yards from my buddy and I, and we literally booked it down the mountainside during hail and just torrential rain. I drew a shotgun fall turkey tag and had some turkey sightings, but zero luck at getting close to anything. I didn't understand really at the time how hard of a hunt that would actually be, but I made up for it with some great finds for elk spots and hopefully will utilize those this fall. I did a bit of dove hunting with my good friend Mike Ornosky from Christian Hunters of America. Dropped about 27 dove in an hour and a half. Make sure, by the way, to go follow Christian Hunters of America over on Facebook and Instagram. They're a great group of mentor-centric guys, and they hold all sorts of hunting seminars. They have an elk seminar, javelina seminar. They do lots of great things, too, for the community. I drew a tag for rifle deer in November and tagged out on day 2. I spent most of my time up to that scouting, running trail cams, patterning the deer, and just learning their general home range and how they move about within it. Post-harvest of my 2018 buck, I prepped for OTC archery coming up in January. My buddy Jimmy got a bow from his wife for Christmas, so I helped him get ready for OTC season as well. And come January 1st, Jimmy and I hit the hills and had stalks put down on day 1, New Year's Day, only 2 hours into the day. We had great stalks put on throughout January and a lot of newly found pressure to be dealt with as well. I discovered the importance of coyote hunting, and I'll talk more on that later. All in all, I left the hills this year with a great amount of knowledge gained and a very grateful attitude that I'm even able to partake in something like the North American conservation model. Alright, I'm going to jump right into 2018 rifle deer hunt. So November 2018, rifle deer season. Some of the things I want to cover is pressure and how to deal with it. Decision making beforehand and the importance of a game plan. I made a lot of my decisions on the fly, and I wish I had kind of planned things out in my head before. Possibly skipping opening weekend or intending just to hang back and just watch. The importance of patterning deer and executing on those patterns. And then how I patterned my deer via trail cams, continuous scouting, about 1 to 2 weekends a month since August. So order of events for when I harvested my buck in November. I got there Thursday, just after work. I booked it up north and arrived in the field. Jumped out of the car and immediately started scouting until dark. I saw a fair bit of activity. Once the sun set, I set up camp, got ready to hit it early in the morning. Friday, scouted until about mid-afternoon. A little over halfway through the day, I was sitting under a perfectly placed juniper that had a perfect bed of lush green grass underneath it. It was the best glassing spot. I set down my AR-10 on the bipod next to me and started glassing the north face of a ridge. After sitting there for a couple hours, I stood up to readjust, let my legs stretch a little, and all of a sudden I just hear a plunk, this metallic thud at my feet. As I had stood up, my leg tipped my AR-10 just enough for it to roll over and slam the scope right onto like a grapefruit-sized rock. I inspected the scope and saw a fair-sized gash in it, but it didn't puncture anything. The rings weren't loose and nothing appeared off, so I just kind of brushed it aside, noted to myself to be more careful, and then just continued with my day. Friday late afternoon, on a separate ridge, I spotted a herd of deer moving southward, and so I decided to pursue them. They dropped in elevation and began to feed in a flat, this open grass plain. I stalked up to 235 yards and took cover behind a couple of boulders and propped up my rifle, ranged kind of into the sun a little bit, and got myself set up. I shot and just completely missed. The deer didn't run. They didn't even spook. They literally just kind of looked around like, what the heck was that? And continued feeding. So an unfortunate way to be the first shot to ring out for rifle season in that area. But I glassed the deer until dark and kept a sharp eye on the buck that I targeted the whole time, just to ensure that I didn't graze or injure him at all. The following morning at sunrise, assuming due to my shot, there's literally a minimum of 2 hunters in pairs per ridge top looking over the entire valley that I shot in. So I decided to glass the ridges that they all had their backs to and spent the morning doing so. During that time, I'm glassing, I'm pondering and trying to connect the dots of how I had missed my shot. And finally it clicks. It knocked my rifle over, hitting the scope, the gash on the scope, it all just made sense. So upon examining the scope again, I found the gash in the tube was actually a lot deeper than I thought. And fortunately it's a vortex, so I can send that in for warranty. But I found more severe scratches on the opposite side as well. I realized my aim was way off and low. I went to the spot where I shot at the buck and searched for bullet impact anywhere nearby. Couldn't find anything. I tried to figure out where I could go and resight my rifle in, and fortunately there's a 100-yard indoor range nearby, and I didn't have to worry about shooting locally and spooking off the deer. So I spent the early afternoon getting sighted back in and hastily rushed back out into the field. By 3 p.m., I'm back out under a large juniper in some grassy fields where the deer were the night before. So I'm walking back and forth, pondering the events, and I decided to wait and see if they'd come back again through this same spot to feed on those small green shoots that were everywhere. So I log in my mind the current wind direction, and I know that by 4 to 4:30 the wind would change from east to west to north to south. So putting the wind directly in my face, which would be perfect. And sure enough, on the dot, the wind changes at 4:30, and I see a pair of antlers crest the top of a gauntlet on the opposite ridge from my position, which is where the deer had actually come from the night before. I knew exactly the path the deer would walk along. They had worn like this extremely visible trail right along the mountainside. Instead of shooting upward like last time, I decided I wanted to get closer, having only sighted into 100 yards, and I still wasn't feeling super confident, about the condition of my scope. So I dashed across this grass plain and scurried up the mountainside, and immediately hit prone on this little dirt knoll that kind of jutted out from the landscape. I plopped myself down into prone, rested my rifle on my pack, and just waited. and waited. And waited. I started to get a little nervous because I knew the speed at which the deer were moving, and yet I wasn't seeing them crest around this thicket that I knew they would walk right past. I started to worry that perhaps I had maybe spooked them in my trek up the mountainside. I kind of pinballed from tree to tree on the way up there to keep myself concealed. So I decided to stalk in closer since the wind was right in my face. And it was only day 2 after all. I didn't really have anything to lose. I closed the distance even more from 125 yards on the dirt knoll to the thicket down to only 64 yards dirt knoll to the thicket. I anticipated them passing at pretty much any moment. Finally, I spotted a single pair of doe ears popping up just around the side of the mountain at 64 yards. Then, of course, spiking my adrenaline, antlers appeared. The buck walked back and forth from left to right about 3 times and never really presented a full shot. Finally, he caught notice of me and, out of curiosity, perked his head up in that way that, curious deer will tend to do. He took about 3 to 4 steps forward and went broadside. To quote Steve Ranella and the gang over at the Meat Eater podcast, "Blouch!" I dropped him with roughly 7 minutes until last shooting light, and the buck took the 308 at 64 yards and ran, or more so stumbled really, 10 to 15 yards downhill. I could hear him asphyxiate, and I gave it about another 15 minutes before I went over to find him, clean him off, took some photos, called the wife and a few buddies, and told them I'd be home early. So I gutted the buck and carried him out otherwise whole about a little over a mile back to my car. Pointers. One crucial thing that I learned in this whole ordeal is that paracord is a lifesaver. Even with a pack designed and framed for carrying out big game, I'm extremely grateful that I had paracord with me because I used it in so many ways that evening. If you guys head over to my Instagram at BowhuntingAZ, you can see how I fixed the deer to my 6-sight backpack. Another pointer, pressure and how to deal with it. I'd like to say you could almost certainly expect some form of pressure in one way or another. Unless you're going to go deep into backcountry on a backpacking hunt, then obviously you won't have to worry as much. But for people who do the whole road access and then 2 to 3 or even 6 to 7 mile hike in, you're going to see someone. You're going to have a side-by-side pass by or something. So be prepared to adapt to whatever circumstances may arise. I've seen dozens of side-by-sides roll by, and the deer never flinch. So although it's a huge annoyance to me, I've learned that typically the animals could care less. Decision making beforehand and the importance of a game plan. Know what and how you want to attack the hunt the day before you get there. What are you going to do if this happens? What are you going to do if that happens? What happens if you tag out day 1? What happens if you tag out on day 6? Or what happens if you see an animal right off the bat? Be aware mentally of those encounters and options so you can act decisively on them when the event occurs before you and you're not just stuck there like a deer in the headlights. Possibly skipping opening weekend or intending to just hang back and just watch. I thought my friend was outright insane when he offered me this solution. Now, in hindsight, I'm not so sure he was crazy at all. 80 to 90% of the hunters that you see opening morning and opening weekend will not be there come Monday morning. That's something to think about. So trust me, I saw it with my own eyes. After harvesting my buck, I went back and fully packed up Camp Monday, and there was not a single soul out there. The importance of patterning deer and executing on those patterns. I don't know what else to say on this really. I was able to fully pattern my deer and execute on it. Being in the field just to examine them and watch afar as an observer was crucial to this whole thing going down. And I'm not just talking about the weekend it happened, but building up to it from August to November was definitely crucial, no doubt. How I patterned my deer via trail cams, continuous scouting 1 to 2 weekends a month since August. Trail cams played a huge role in helping me out. Now I only run 2 cams, one on video and another on 8-shot burst photo. I cannot recommend them enough, though. Move them around, too. Don't be afraid to move it every couple weeks if you're not getting the results you want. I don't know what's good or bad, but I've been averaging on about 200 to 250 video clips of deer every other month or so, right about there, when I go out and I'll swap out cards. I know which group is heading which way, and the time and date being set accurately is definitely a must-have. Remember to watch the moon phase too, but I'll touch a little bit more on that later. Scent Assassin, the new leader in scent elimination, manufactures the latest technology in scent elimination spray, body wash, and laundry detergent. Forget the wind, hunt anywhere, anytime. Check out their full product line at www.scentassassin.com. Use promo code BowhuntingAZ for 20% off your order. Lessons learned. I had about 6 stocks total for the OTC 2019 season, and that's where I really learned a bulk of this information. A couple of major lessons that I learned from each specific stock. One is make a noise, get their attention, because it works, especially when you get close and have that encounter going on. Don't let yourself psych yourself out. No, a mouth call won't work. That's not true. It does. Don't be afraid to not take the shot. All right, just breathe and anticipate that adrenaline and mentally fight through it. Lesson 1, make a noise to get their attention. It works. Don't let yourself psych yourself out. So during the beginning of January OTC archery, my buddy Jimmy and I headed back to the truck after calling it a day. I joked with him that the deer we were after were going to be right next to the truck as we headed back. And sure enough, at 205 yards away, I spot 4 does just staring at us with their ears perked. We both contemplated what to do next. We only had maybe 30 to 20 minutes of shooting light left. And we decided to see how close we could walk up to them in the middle of the road. And we accomplished up to 154 yards out. After that, we decided to leave it to luck and threw down a stock on a buck in the herd that was just watching us. Jimmy hit some chest-high thickets and snaked his way up the side of the ridge. I stayed in plain sight in hopes of distracting the deer and keeping their attention focused on me so that Jimmy could close the distance. Every time they'd look in his general direction, I would just make a kissing sound to draw their gaze back to me. Just a simple... I'd watch the buck through my binos and could see Jimmy's shadowed figure passing through the bottom portion of my lens. The deer moved about 15 yards left to right as if he was like about to book it, and I mouth called a doe bleat, and the buck just stopped dead in his tracks, looked right at me. I did it again, and then a third time, and to my shock, the buck starts walking towards me. I literally out loud to myself just said, "Dude, no way." The buck stood just slightly elevated on a rock ledge about 85 yards from Jimmy. Now, in the end, he decided not to take the shot, and rightly so. If you're not comfortable or ever have doubt, do not take the shot. There's nothing wrong in that. In fact, I'd say it's the right thing to do. All in all, we had a phenomenal experience, one that I'll never forget, and both of us walked away with an awesome story and more experience from the whole event. Lesson 2, just breathe. Anticipate that adrenaline and mentally fight through it. On opening morning, Jimmy and I were only about 2 hours in when a buck came strolling up the opposite ridge of us. The buck turned off the ridge and started to utilize a natural gauntlet to work up towards the nearest ridge and elevate himself. This gauntlet led right past our position, and I could tell he was going to come right to us. I told Jimmy to knock an arrow, hook his release, and hold his bow out in front of him. The plan played out perfectly, and the buck walked right to us like we anticipated. I whispered to Jimmy to draw his bow just as the buck walked behind a bush. I told Jimmy, "You're about to feel your adrenaline hit you hard. Fight through it mentally. Just breathe." Sure enough, Jimmy said later on that right as I said that, his adrenaline hit him. A series of bushes made a little cut that the buck would perfectly be presented for a heart shot should he walk right past us, basically. Unfortunately, the buck stopped with one of the outer bushes of that cut perfectly placed over his neck and covering the rest of his body. I'm not really sure what happened going forward, We were upwind of him, didn't make any sound, and basically it just seems that his sixth sense just kicked in and he knew something was there. In hindsight, this is where I should have made a sound, yet we just stood there quietly as the buck, unfortunately, only at 52 yards, made us hasten stroll away from our position and just stayed in covered behind the bushes. Remember, anticipate that rush of adrenaline and just mentally fight through it. Sometimes it can cause you to do something irrational. Sometimes it can cause you to get so laser focused that if there is more deer around you, you may not notice another opportunity that's available to you. And that wasn't the case here, but it's always a possibility. Open Country Optics is your #1 online source for optics and optics rentals. With quality Swarovski glass before your eyes, Open Country Optics brings the game closer. Rentals include a tripod, binos, and you can even add a phone scope or foldable chair to glass from. All of the optics arrive in durable Pelican cases with insulated foam. You won't find any other company who provides you an all-inclusive package like Open Country Optics. Visit them today at opencountryoptics.com. Use promo code BHAZ and get 5% off rentals or $50 off any optics purchase. Questions from Instagram. If you're not following BowhuntingAZ on Instagram, go check us out at BowhuntingAZ. Bush League Bowhunter asks, deer patterns you might have noticed and how you feel moon phase affects them. So at first, I was skeptical that moon phase affected deer. I've just seen a lot of debate on it. However, after this past season, I'm now a firm believer. Now, I don't think they live and die by the moon phase alone. However, it certainly can result in increased or decreased activity. I've definitely noticed less movement on days where the moon was more full the night before, meaning they're feeding more nocturnally due to increased vision. In periods where it's a new moon or very little light due to overcast nights, I've been able to count on significant daytime movement, and it's proven true time and time again. AZ Velvet Archer asks, stages and actions of the muley and coos rut. I've noticed it starts to hit the last week or so of December. This year, I saw more coos deer being tenacious versus mule deer. I did meet some fellow hunters out there who witnessed 2 coos bucks fighting on the last weekend of January. My buddy Jimmy and I also heard 2 bucks fighting right behind our blind that we were sitting in as well. Back to my pointers that I learned this season: carry a doe bleat on you. Remember that these deer are mating, and throwing out a doe bleat could be the difference of getting that shot off or not. Find the group of does and you will definitely find the bucks. My findings have been if the buck isn't with that herd, he's literally just the ridge over, but he's never too far away. Be diligent and keep glassing once you find that herd of does. During the rut, that buck is not going to risk losing those does to a competitor by leaving them completely unattended. Master the Hunt asks, anything coos related? I've heard a lot of arguing on social media about coos and mule deer and them not commingling together. This year, particularly, I saw coos deer and mule deer hanging out in the same herd multiple times, even feeding alongside of each other. Coos deer, I feel like, are infinitely harder to spot unless they're directly in sunlight. Then they seem to just glow. Their fur has like a definite shine to it. I've noticed a lot of coos bucks moving into the spots where the mule deer bucks are getting hammered. This might just be a local event, but I'm sure to some extent it's making way for one species to overtake and have less competition with the others. So it'll be more interesting next year and being able to see which species there's more of. One final note, the importance of coyote hunting. I had probably 3 different stalks that all involved coyote pressure. The night that I actually shot my buck, the deer ended up being pushed towards me a little bit faster than what they were just doing at their own pace due to a coyote howling. So right when I said I saw those the doe ears pop up over that ridge. A coyote had howled just before that, the ridge behind them. And so that caused the deer to move a little bit more hastily towards me, which obviously was wonderful for me. But that was one of the first instances of pressure that I experienced. Now, there was another point in time where I was I was at the same spot, and I was under a juniper waiting for them to walk past me on that trail. I saw the deer's ears crest the ridge of that gauntlet and start to come towards me, and a coyote cut them off in between my position and the deer's position and started chasing the deer, putting the pressure on them, chasing them back the opposite way. So they went back over the ridge where they were coming from, disappeared completely, and I never saw them again. And then a third time, I almost tagged out the last day of OTC archery. I was maybe 40 yards from a buck. He was coming right to my position. I had a little bit of a elevation, like knoll, kind of blocking my figure from his. And he was making a beeline for me, and I knew he either had to go right or left. And out of nowhere, a coyote was beelining it from my right, just coming right towards that buck. And I was just furious at this point, because it was like, man, how many times am I going to have these guys ruin my opportunity? So needless to say, I'll definitely be out there fairly shortly in the next couple weekends doing some coyote control. I know exactly where their den is, and so I'll be putting the herd on them here pretty soon. All right, guys, well, that's it for this episode of the BowhuntingAZ podcast. Thank you so much for your time and for listening. Please make sure to subscribe, hit those 5 stars, and leave a little review over for me on iTunes. You can find me across all social media at BowhuntingAZ. Good luck to everyone today on getting drawn for elk and antelope. Tag me on any social media to show me that you got drawn or not. God bless everyone. Have a great weekend. We'll see you soon.